Hey coders, in this lesson we're going to be exploring gaps in PineScript. So what I want to do in this lesson with this script is calculate the gap between two candles. So let's look at this candle for example. What I want to do here is calculate the percentage gap from this bar's close to this bar's open. So that would be approximately 0.84%. Let's figure out how to calculate this gap in PineScript. Now, there are several use cases for detecting these gaps. I'm not going to go into them today. I'm just going to show you how you can calculate the gap percentage in your scripts. And we can cover gap techniques, trading techniques, and filters and so on in a different lesson. But for now, let's just get the gap close value. And for that, I simply need to subtract the current bar's open. Looking at this example here, we want to subtract this bar's opening price from the previous bar's closing price. And then we want to divide that number, that value, by the current bar's opening price. And then if we multiply that resulting value by 100, that gives us a percentage and we'll get our gap percentage. So now let me paste this down here, change the color to color.purple, save my code, and now we're getting gaps drawing into this little indicator box down here. And one thing I can do is change the precision of this to, let's try 3. This is the decimal precision. That will give us a little bit more information about our gap price. There we go. So now if I hover over this bar here, if I put a vertical line on this bar here, zoom in a bit, you can see that our gap percentage is 0.823%. So if I measure that out, the measuring tool is not quite as accurate as our script, but we get roughly 0.82 or 83% of a gap. Pretty simple math there. You'll notice that we also have negative gaps. So this is a gap down and we get a negative value. So this gap here was minus 1.118%. So if I measure that out, this bar opened on the next bar with a gap of 1.11 or 12%. If you want to convert your gap number into a positive number so that no matter what the gap was, whether it was a bullish or bearish gap, you just get a positive number, you can simply use the math.abs function and wrap that around your entire code, your entire equation, and the math.abs function will convert it into an absolute number or a positive number. So if it's a positive number, it will stay positive. If it's a negative number, it will be converted into positive. So if I hover my mouse over this bar here, this negative 1.118% gap, save my code. Now it's a positive 1.118 gap, and all of the gaps on our chart are being displayed as a positive percentage. So that's how we detect the gap between one bar's close and the next bar's open. Let's try calculating the gap from the low of the previous bar before the gap and the high of the next bar. So the distance, the gap distance. Now, obviously, if this was a real-time bar, that value would be changing dynamically. But on historical price action, we can accurately measure the gap distance as a percentage from the previous bar's low to the next bar's high. So I'm going to create a new variable here called gap distance. And now we need to check if the current bar's low is greater than the previous bar's high. That would give us a positive gap. If we have a positive gap, a gap up, then we want to use the same equation we have here, except that we need to subtract the low from the previous bar's high, divide that value by the current bar's low, and then multiply that value by 100 to turn it into a percentage. And then we can say otherwise using our ternary or conditional operator here. If the current bar's low is not greater than the previous bar's high, that means we had a gap down. And so we need to do the same equation, but in the opposite direction. We need to subtract the current bar's high from the previous bar's low, and then divide that value by the current bar's high and multiply that result by 100. And this gives us our gap distance as a percentage. So let me plot that beneath our gap close, call this gap distance, and I'll give this a color of color.white. Let me save the code. And now on this bar, we should be getting roughly 2.32%. So if I look down there, if I zoom right in here and measure from this candle's low down to this candle's high, we have negative 2.34% of a gap from this low to this high. And that is how you detect gaps in price action using Python scripts.